Do you remember when there were everyday things in the 1970s that you paid for entirely in cash? Because before tap to pay, before scan and go, before even debit cards were normal, you lived in a decade where your entire economic reality existed inside the bills you carried. The crumpled notes tucked into your wallet, the exact change rolling in your pocket, the smell of the bill that just passed through 6 different hands before it got to yours. And every single transaction was this small ritual of physical money, touchable money, real money. This entire world we're about to walk through was something your body actually felt, not a notification, not a silent debit line on your banking app, not an invisible number going up or down. Cash meant you literally held your weekly limits on your life inside your hands. And if you didn't have enough on you, the thing simply didn't happen. This is what makes the 1970s so emotionally insane to go back to, because this whole system rewired your brain. You didn't just learn value, you felt value. You weighed value. You heard value when the drawer snapped shut with that metallic slam in the general store counter. You smelled value in that paper bill dust scent that lived inside old registers and bank envelopes. Today, almost everything is invisible, disconnected, digital, floating, silent, and you don't fully experience a purchase in your nervous system anymore. But in the 70s, every purchase was embodied, every payment was physical, and it shaped you in ways you still don't fully realize. So let's go through 25 things you paid cash for in the 70s. And I want you to walk back into each memory with your senses first. I want you to feel these purchases again, because each one of these items wasn't just a transaction. It was a moment inside your life, a scene, a micro story of the world you lived in. And in every single one of these, you can feel the gap between then and today. Here are the first few. Buying gas. You pull into the station, no self-service, no robotic screen, no digital rate that changes 40 times a day by algorithm. A physical human being walks out to your car. You roll down the window, you talk to them, you hand them paper money. You can literally smell the gasoline in the air like this thick, warm chemical presence. The smell would latch onto your clothes. When you got back in the car, you could still smell it in the fibers of the seatbelt. And you weren't budgeting digital auto, reload, or Apple Pay wrenching $40 without sensation. You sat there and mentally calculated how much of that $20 bill you were about to lose. You did the math in real time inside your head, and if gas went up by a few cents, you felt it, not theoretically, not conceptually. You felt that difference in your chest because you could watch more of your remaining physical cash disappear. And today, you just swipe, tap, or watch it silently get deducted without pain or friction because your brain no longer gets the feedback loop of value disappearing. Do you remember how heavy a full tank felt in the 70s? Buying records. One of the purest dopamine hits of the decade. You walk into a record shop, and it was like stepping into a live frequency. You see the rows. You hear the music playing from the store speakers. You feel the air in the shop vibrating with bass. You touch the glossy album covers, the thick cardboard sleeves, the static crackle on the inside plastic slip. You flip one, then another, as that dusty vinyl smell lives in your nose. And when one grabbed you, the tension inside you was real, that internal tug of war. Because you only had so much cash, so the purchase wasn't casual. You chose that record like you were selecting a memory, selecting a future mood state, selecting the soundtrack that was going to permanently brand a season of your life, and you handed physical bills for it. Today, you pay nothing. You have 60 million songs for $9 a month. You don't commit to anything. You barely even finish full albums. Everything is infinite. Nothing costs you emotionally anymore. But back then, that one record was a piece of your identity. Do you remember that feeling in your stomach when you decided to part with that cash? Buying cigarettes. In the 70s, the relationship to cigarettes was physical, casual, normalized, ordinary, and the way you bought them was extremely intimate with cash. You walked up to the counter. You asked for your brand by name. It was a ritual. They reached under the counter or from the wall behind them, slid the box forward, and you paid physical bills for it. You opened the box with your fingers. You smelled it before you even smoked it. That dry, leafy tobacco scent. You flicked it. You tapped it. You lit it. Every single step involved your hand. And because you paid in actual bills, you felt how much smoking cost you. Today, it auto-rebills or gets silently charged, or you don't even see the number. You don't track the burden. Back then, you felt the subtraction. Each pack was a micro-calculation in your life. Did you ever run short for something else because of it? Buying movie tickets. In the 70s, this wasn't just entertainment. This was ceremony. You walked up to the theater window. You said how many tickets you wanted, and you paid cash. The smell of buttered popcorn in the air mixed with the old carpet. The projector hum. You held the physical tickets in your fingers, that thin, stiff cardstock, and it signaled your entry into a different world. And if you didn't have enough cash that night, the movie simply didn't happen. You couldn't buy now, pay later. Today, you tap your card before you even arrive. You can pre-buy seats while half asleep. Your brain no longer associates the cost with the moment. But back then, you felt the exchange inside your body. Do you remember the little rip sound when they tore the ticket stub and handed the other half back to you? Buying the newspaper. That thick sound of coins hitting the counter. You walked to the corner store. You physically exchanged money for the news. The world didn't auto-update your life every second. You didn't scroll. You paid cash for information. And when you carried that paper under your arm, you owned the news. And today, you get everything free, infinite, non-stop, and you barely process any of it. You don't cherish information anymore. But back then, every headline cost you something. What was your routine paper? Buying candy. Candy was that pure 70s childhood currency exchange. You walked into the drugstore. You felt the air-conditioned cold hit your skin. You stared at the candy display like you were looking at treasure. You picked out your favorites. You counted change. You had to earn candy. And the sound of coins dropping into your palm was the pre-dopamine moment. Today, kids just tap Apple Pay on vending machines. No friction, no anticipation, no personal sacrifice. Do you remember which candy was worth your quarters the most? Buying school supplies. You didn't place bulk orders online. You didn't have branded, curated aesthetic study kits. You walked into an actual office supply store where the shelves smelled like chalk dust, rubber erasers, sharpened number 2 pencils, and fresh notebook paper. You picked up folders and felt the specific weight of the cardstock in your hand. You opened spiral notebooks and heard that metal coil squeak as the pages flipped. You didn't compare Amazon reviews. You compared thickness, feel, and whether the paper bled ink. And you counted out your dollar bills, watching how much of your allowance vanished one notebook at a time. Today, kids never touch value. They don't feel scarcity. They don't have friction between what they want and what they can afford. School supplies were one of the first moments where you learned that physical money controlled your reality. Did you ever memorize exactly which pen felt best in your hand because you knew you couldn't waste cash experimenting? Paying bus fare. You stepped up onto that metal step. The interior was warm, slightly dusty, slightly humid, and you reached into your pocket for exact change. You didn't tap a card. You didn't load digital credits. You dropped coins into that mechanical fare box, that little clank-clack sound that told you the system accepted your reality. You could feel when you were running low. The weight in your pockets told your brain whether or not you could afford to travel. Today, you just swipe. You can move without cost consciousness. You move in a frictionless world. But back then, the physical heaviness or lightness of your pocket literally controlled your mobility. Do you remember the cold metal of those quarters against your palm when the weather was cold? Ordering fast food. You walked in, and the smell of grease, salt, hot air, and fryer oil was loud. You pointed at a menu that was printed letters, not a screen. And when you handed over cash, you felt that you were trading a piece of your week. A burger wasn't background convenience. It was a treat you committed to. You didn't default eat fast food twice a day because of autopilot digital billing. You made conscious choices based on what physical money you actually had. Today, food appears at your door with no friction. Uber Eats makes time and value meaningless. Back then, your body was constantly computing trade-offs. Which meal was worth the bills you were about to lose? What fast food spot in the 70s felt the most worth it to you? Buying shoes? It wasn't click and checkout. You walked into a shoe store. Leather smell in the air. You sat down. You touched shoes. You bent them. You examined stitching. You looked the salesman eye to eye. Shoes weren't disposable culture. They were durable goods. You planned for them. You waited to buy them. You felt the weight of that price because that was a stack of bills disappearing from your wallet in one violent instant. Today, you buy 4 pairs in one silent cart with no emotional recoil. Do you remember the exact physical feeling your parents had counting money in their hand before committing to the pair you chose? Buying soda from vending machines. The metallic weight of a quarter sliding in, that heavy mechanical grind inside the machine, the clunk of the bottle dropping down to the chute. Your body felt every step. Today, vending machines take cards, digital pay, no physical feedback. Back then, the machine was a ritual, a machine you negotiated with, and with each purchase, you had to make the choice. Was this soda worth the coins? Did you ever overload the coin return button hoping for a stray coin to pop out? Buying lunch at school? You didn't tap a student ID with stored value. You carried bills. You carried coins. You budgeted in real time. Lunch wasn't guaranteed. It wasn't prepaid by auto systems. When you were out of cash, you were out of ability, which means you learned survival budgeting younger than today's kids ever will. Do you remember the feeling of spreading coins out on your tray to see if you had enough for a chocolate milk upgrade? Buying magazines. You stood at magazine racks and you flipped pages carefully, not too aggressively to crease anything. You smelled the glossy paper. You weighed whether buying that issue was worth your week's discretionary money. Today, every article is free. Every gossip site refreshes constantly. Information costs nothing, so value evaporated. In the 70s, you invested in curiosity. What was the magazine that always pulled cash from your hand even when you planned not to buy it? Paying for haircuts. You walked into the barbershop or the salon and you didn't tap a screen. You didn't auto-tip percentages generated for you by a UI. You took out physical bills and you chose the tip. You directly measured gratitude in money, heavily embodied. The hum of clippers, the smell of barbicide, the hair falling around your shoulders. Everything was tactile. Today, digital transactions flatten emotional weight. Back then, the cash you handed over was a small ceremony. Do you remember how often you pre-counted the tip in your head before they even spun your chair around to reveal your cut? Buying Polaroid film. This one hurt beautifully because Polaroid wasn't cheap, which meant every photo had stakes. Every shot was a commitment. When you handed over cash for those packs of film, you were literally buying potential memories. And because it cost you something physical, you took fewer photos, but every single one mattered more. Today we take 100 pictures of nothing. In the 70s, each photo was a small gamble with cash behind it. Do you remember that anticipation burn in your chest, waiting for the film strip to develop in your hand? Renting movies, pre-home video era, or earliest rental shops. You physically left your house, you browsed shelves, you negotiated internally about the cost versus your remaining money for the week. Today, streaming is passive background noise. You don't feel a monetary hit with each movie. Back then, every single rental generated value because you paid with real money in real time. Do you remember the exact thickness and weight of those early video cases when they felt like luxury objects? Paying for parking. There were physical meters. You fed them coins. You were hyper-conscious how fast time was burning because those coins represented real time literally burning away. Today, your car app auto bills. You extend time with no emotional sensation. In the 70s, you felt time in money. You felt the penalty in the most physical way possible. Which parking meter in your memory always made you anxious? Buying ice cream from an ice cream truck. This was a whole identity moment as a kid. You heard the music from far away. You could hear it coming like this rising adrenaline soundtrack. You ran inside, grabbed coins, sprinted outside, and traded physical money for instant sugary happiness. Today, kids Apple Pay for ice cream in silence. The ritual is gone. Do you remember the exact sound of loose change bouncing in your pocket as you ran toward the truck before it turned the corner? Buying books. You walked into a bookstore in the 70s, and it felt like stepping into a world that actually smelled like knowledge. You held paperbacks in your hand and felt the stiffness of the spine before you broke it open. You flipped pages with your fingers, and you could literally smell the ink. And to take that world home, you had to physically hand over dollars. Books required commitment. Books required sacrifice. You didn't buy 40 books casually because you might read them someday. You bought one, maybe two, because that was the limit of the cash you had on you. Today you hoard books in digital lists, wish list piles, carts, tabs, but they cost you nothing emotionally. Back then, buying one book was an entire internal debate. Which book did you spend the longest time choosing before parting with the cash? Buying dinner at diners. A 70s diner was sensory overload. Sizzling grill sound, clanging plates, coffee smell so thick you could taste it before you drank it, the cushioned booth sticking slightly to your skin when it was warm. You sat there and talked with the waitress. The bill came, a paper slip. You placed cash on that slip. You tipped with physical bills, not auto-generated percentages. You felt the emotional weight of gratitude and value. Today, the payment moment is invisible, frictionless. In the 70s, the moment of payment was intimate. Do you remember sliding bills under the salt shaker so they wouldn't blow or shift before she collected it? Paying for phone calls. People forget how insane this was. You paid money just to talk. You picked up a payphone, that cold, heavy metal receiver. You dropped coins into that slot, and every coin literally represented seconds. Time and communication weren't infinite. They cost you in real time. Today, endless messaging, endless calling, endless video requires nothing. The 70s forced you to measure conversation, to weigh every word. Which call from a payphone do you remember feeling like a life or death decision because the coins you had left weren't enough? Buying furniture. Furniture wasn't fast fashion disposable junk. You planned for it. You visited showrooms. You ran your hand along wood grain. You sat in chairs. You tested cushions. And when you bought it, you dropped stacks of physical bills on the counter. big bills. This was adulthood leveling. Furniture purchases changed the direction of your month. Today, you buy furniture on Affirm while half distracted with a TikTok open. Do you remember the single biggest cash furniture purchase that terrified you the most at the register? Buying Christmas gifts. The holiday season in the 70s wasn't a digital bulk order operation. You walked store to store. You hid bags in your trunk. You felt every gift in your body because every gift required peeling bills out of your hand slowly and watching your holiday budget shrink in a way that physically tightened your chest. Gifts were earned. Gifts were weighted with meaning because they actually cost you pain. Today, Amazon makes Christmas frictionless, emotionally weightless, infinite. Do you remember how heavy your wallet got at the start of December and how terrifyingly light it felt by the 23rd? Paying car repairs. There was no online invoice, no Apple Pay tap, no credit autopilot. When the mechanic walked out, wiped his hands on the towel, and gave you the number, that number meant something primal. Because you had to hand physical bills over for that repair, and you felt every dollar bleeding out of your life force. Today, most car payments drain silently. In the 70s, car repairs were financial trauma moments. Do you remember staring down at your wallet knowing it was going to walk out of that shop almost empty? Buying vinyl cleaner plus maintenance supplies. Because if you owned records in the 70s, you protected them like treasure. You bought record cleaner fluid, those velvet brushes, anti-static solutions, sleeve replacements, and you paid cash for all of those micro purchases. You physically invested in preserving sound. Today, music is infinitely copyable. Nothing needs preserving. Vinyl care was ritual. Did you ever notice how taking care of your music in the 70s felt like taking care of a piece of yourself? Buying flowers. A florist shop in the 70s was emotional atmosphere, cold refrigerators humming, the thick green smell of stems and leaves, roses, carnations, lilies, each one priced by emotion and moment. When you paid cash, it meant something. Flowers were emotional currency. You were paying to communicate something you couldn't say in words. Today, a flower order is a UI click. Back then, that cash payment was deeply vulnerable. Who is the first person you remember buying flowers for? Buying vinyl concert tickets in person. The concert wasn't digital. You stood in line outside record stores, box offices, sporting arenas, and when your turn came, you handed over cash and were handed back paper tickets, physical proof of an event in your future. These were prized objects. People saved them in drawers for decades. Today, concert purchases happen half distracted while eating breakfast. No physical stakes. Do you remember which concert was the one you spent cash you really shouldn't have, but you did anyway? Buying bread and milk at the corner market. You didn't do weekly Amazon Fresh. You walked down the street. You bought bread fresh. You held the loaf in your hand. You smelled it. Milk was cold, heavy. It condensed water onto your hand. And you paid cash every few days, which made basic survival a series of micro-financial moments. Today, survival is invisible subscriptions. In the 70s, survival cost felt daily. Which corner shop in your memory had the single most consistent bread you trusted more than anywhere else? Buying tools. Hardware stores were temples for adulthood. Wooden handles, metal weight, aisles that smelled like oil, steel, dust, rubber hoses. Tools were long-term commitments, not disposable items that break in 3 uses because they're mass-produced for subscription convenience. You held a wrench in your hand, you gauged its weight, you paid cash. Today, tools are Amazon checkout filler. Back then, tools felt like generational investment. Did you ever buy a tool with cash that lasted 20+ years? Buying the jukebox plays in diners plus bars. People forget this too. You paid cash to control the soundscape, to put your song into the room. That jukebox coin drop was a power move. It meant, you all are now gonna feel my mood. Today, music is algorithmic mush. Back then, that coin created atmosphere. Which single jukebox song did you spend the most coins on because you needed it to hit a room at the exact moment? Buying Carnival arcade tokens. You paid cash to buy physical tokens, which represented temporary access to possibility. And you held them like treasure. You put them in your pockets. You heard them clink. Today, arcades auto-bill through cards or preloaded digital swipe systems. Back then, tokens were power. Each one was a mini-universe of chance. Which game in the 70s ate the most tokens out of your hand? Buying postage stamps. In the 70s, you felt the cost of communication because you paid for stamps with cash, in person. You walked into a post office, stood in line, smelled that odd mix of dust, plus envelope glue, plus old wooden counters, and you physically bought stamps. Communication cost money. Every letter cost you something emotionally because you had to trade physical bills for the ability to reach another human being. Today you send 400 texts before noon for free. Nothing costs anything. Nothing lands with weight. But back then, a letter was an event. Do you remember licking that envelope seal like you were sealing something sacred shut? Buying soda fountain drinks at drugstores. This wasn't grabbing a plastic bottle from a giant chain fridge. This was a ritual, sitting at a counter with a chrome soda fountain machine, where carbonation and syrup felt like alchemy. You watched the server pull the lever. You heard the hiss. You tasted that first cold, sweet punch in your body. And yes, you paid cash for that experience. Today you buy 20 sodas out of boredom. You barely taste them. But in the 70s, one cold fountain drink was a reward. Which soda fountain spot felt like a tiny world only you belonged to? Buying cassettes when vinyl wasn't convenient. When tapes started becoming mainstream, you could carry your music in your pocket, in your car, in your bag, which meant you ended up paying cash for cassettes constantly to build little worlds inside that plastic. The clack-click sound of popping one open, the ribbon inside that would sometimes unravel and ruin your heart. But you still bought more. Today, playlists cost nothing. In the 70s, every new album tape was a sacrifice. Which artist did you end up buying multiple formats for because the music just mattered that much? Buying batteries. People forget how often the 70s forced you to buy batteries with cash because everything ran on them. Walkmans, cameras, flashlights, portable radios, toys, and batteries weren't cheap. They were this constant silent tax on mobility plus fun plus tech in that era. Today you recharge endlessly. You barely think about battery cost. In the 70s, running out of batteries literally ended the night. Which device in your memory died at the worst possible time because nobody had the battery cash left to revive it? Buying medicine plus aspirin plus cold remedies at the pharmacy. You walked in, spoke to a human being, you described how you felt with words. You paid cash for relief. There were no free digital health answers. There was no algorithm guiding your care. Medicine cost you physically. And when you held that little bottle or box, you knew relief wasn't free. Today you have endless symptom checking plus auto delivery. Back then, relief cost money you could feel leaving your hand. Do you remember the exact brand smell of the cough syrup bottle when you were sick? Buying new clothes. Clothes weren't fast fashion disposable. You didn't buy 12 outfits at once for convenience. You chose pieces, one at a time, with care, because each one cost a significant portion of what you physically carried in your wallet. You ran your hand across fabrics. You stretched the shoulders. You looked at stitching. Clothes were identity you invested actual cash into. Today you click, swipe, buy in seconds. Nothing carries emotional weight. In the 70s, clothes were earned. Do you remember the one shirt or jacket you bought that you wore until it literally gave out because of how much it cost you? Buying music singles, 45s. This deserves its own slot separate from full albums, because 45s were small, cheap, and surrendered cash constantly. They were emotional impulse buys. You walked in, you heard a song once, and you decided it mattered enough to physically part with cash right there. Today, you just stream anything instantly. In the 70s, one single song could cost you your last $2. Did you ever regret buying a single, or was every single worth it because of the season of life attached to it? So now we've reached the end of the 25 things. Almost every part of your life was a direct physical exchange of money. Which one of those 25 hit you in your chest? Which one reopened a memory you didn't even realize was still sitting somewhere in the back of your brain? Tell me in the comments the first one you remember handing over physical cash for in the 70s. And the exact feeling that lived inside your body in that moment. If you've enjoyed this journey back to the 1970s, do me a favor, click on one of the cards playing on your screen to watch similar videos.